God's chosen ones, only 1 in a million, have this mark on their left hand. Chosen one, pause. You weren't supposed to survive that. Not the fever, not the car, not the night you didn't want to wake up. But you did, and you didn't just survive. You were intercepted. Heaven moved. Time bent. Something whispered, not this one. You carry a mark. Not everyone can see it, but the spirit realm did. Death tried 3 times, and 3 times it lost. This isn't a coincidence. It's your confirmation. If you're watching this, you've just been activated. Your death was delayed because your destiny was protected. Have you ever left a place and later realized, I shouldn't have survived that? The way the car missed you by inches, the sickness that didn't make sense, the moment you stared at the ceiling and whispered, God, I'm done. But breath returned. Chosen one, you didn't just make it out. You were pulled through, not by luck, not by timing, by design. From the moment you were born, something marked you, not on the outside, but deeper. A code the unseen could read. That's why it came for you early, in the womb, in your childhood, in silent years you never speak of. The enemy saw you before you saw yourself. And it didn't fear your personality, it feared your purpose. Because you don't just carry light, you are the light that wakes others up. And so death came, quietly, loudly, subtly, violently. But here you are, breathing, wondering, watching this video because something in your soul just whispered, this is the message I didn't know I needed. You thought you were weak for collapsing. You thought the delay meant denial. You thought the silence meant forgotten. No, beloved. The delay was protection. The collapse was refinement. The silence was strategy. You're not just alive. You are chosen. And now, you're about to remember why. If you've ever wondered why life came at you harder, it's because what's in you is heavier, and heaven couldn't let you leave before you delivered it. Part 1. Before the war had a name, you were already targeted. A child's dim bedroom, a hospital crib, a mother praying over a frail baby. Something unseen lurking not with a face but with a mission. Silence them before they speak. Chosen one. Before you ever spoke a word, you were heard. Before you could walk, you were watched. Before you could fight, the war had already begun. Your earliest memories may be hazy, but your spirit remembers the night fevers, the choking cry, the womb that trembled with complications, the delivery room where silence almost won, but breath broke through. You didn't see it, but something tried to end you before your voice arrived. Spiritual assassinations don't wait for adulthood. They strike at formation, not expression. Some of you were born into chaos, homes that felt more like battlefields than nurseries, rooms heavy with fear, sleep disturbed by shadows no one else could see. You cried in patterns no one understood. You flinched at energies no one else noticed. You felt everything, and that made you vulnerable but also untouchable. They didn't know it then, but you were carrying a blueprint that scared hell, not because of your strength, but because of what would awaken inside you later. That healing touch, that prophetic voice, that wisdom in silence, that authority in softness. So the attacks came early, the near miscarriage, the fevers with no diagnosis, the repeated ER visits, the abusive figure who almost destroyed you. You were a child, but your light, it was full grown, and the enemy saw it. What the doctors called coincidence was actually war in the unseen. Some of you don't even know the full story, but ask your mother, ask your grandmother. There were prayers said over you that didn't make sense. Until now, they knew. Somewhere deep in their bones they felt the threat. And so did heaven, because that first escape, that first time you should have died but didn't, it wasn't recovery, it was a spiritual interception. The enemy said, take them. Heaven said, not this one. So if you ever wondered why you've always felt different, why rooms feel heavier to you, why dreams come early and visions flash like déjà vu, it's because you were touched too early, targeted too early, but also sealed too early. You are the child the storm couldn't take, the light they couldn't extinguish, the assignment that couldn't be aborted. Before you ever knew who you were, darkness did. And that's why it moved so quickly. But heaven moved faster. Reflection question. What if that sickness, that scare, that scream in the night wasn't random? What if it was your first proof that you were marked to survive? Part 2. The first time death reached for you and missed a blurred hospital hallway, a scream that never made it out. A still room at 3 a.m. where breath came back when it shouldn't have. The world around didn't notice, but heaven did. Do you remember it? That one moment that should have been the end. Maybe it was a car skidding. Maybe it was pills in your hand. Maybe it was the scream frozen in your throat during the worst night of your life. Maybe it was the diagnosis that shouldn't have reversed, or the violence that almost happened. It doesn't matter what shape it took. It only matters that you're still here. Death reached for you, time slowed, reality cracked, and something stepped in. You didn't see it, but something bent that moment. A breath returned. A pulse revived. The crash missed. The stranger showed up. The urge lifted. And you walked away thinking that was close. But it wasn't just close, it was divinely rerouted. That wasn't a lucky break. That was a cosmic intervention. Let your soul remember it now. The doctor who said, "We don't know how they pulled through." The moment you blacked out and woke up with no explanation. The voice that whispered, "Don't go," just before everything went wrong. The 1-minute delay that saved your life. That's not just a story. That's your spiritual receipt. When death missed you, your path was sealed in light. That moment that was your initiation. Not into pain, but into purpose. Something happened inside you afterward. You became different. You noticed silence more. You dreamed heavier. You felt things before they happened. You could no longer live blindly because you had seen something. You crossed an invisible threshold, and no one could explain it, but you felt it. Chosen one. You didn't just survive. You were claimed. Heaven whispered, "This one belongs to me." That's why you're still here. That's why time slowed. That's why the hand reached in. That's why the scar still tingles sometimes. That's why you can't forget that moment no matter how much you've tried. Because it was your first confirmation. Your story didn't begin with survival. It began with escape. And escape means purpose. You weren't saved just for peace. You were spared for impact. There's something in you this world still needs. That first time death missed you wasn't mercy. It was strategy. The enemy reached, but heaven said, "This one's not finished." Reflection. Question: if you had died that day, what voices would never have awakened? What healing would never have been released? What light would this world never have seen? Part 3. Your mind was the battlefield, but it didn't break you. A quiet bedroom where the light feels too far away. Late nights when you smiled in front of others but shattered alone. A silent war. No bullets, no bruises, just a soul bleeding where no one could see. Chosen one. The second time death came for you, it didn't show up as violence. It showed up as silence. No one saw the battle, because it was happening where no one looks inside. It wasn't a car accident this time. It wasn't a sickness. It was a quiet erosion of hope. The kind that makes you lie in bed and wonder, would anyone even notice if I didn't wake up? This was a spiritual assassination. From the inside out, you smiled at work. You showed up for family. You even laughed. But inside you were crumbling, falling apart in silence, breaking without sound, and no one noticed. Not because they didn't care, but because your pain learned how to hide. The enemy knew your light couldn't be killed, so it tried to convince you it didn't matter. It told you you're a burden, you're too much. You'll never heal? There's no point. But somehow you stayed. Maybe you don't even know why. Maybe one day the weight just lifted a little. Maybe a stranger said something that cracked the darkness. Maybe a lyric broke through. Maybe you just woke up and didn't feel quite as heavy. That wasn't random. That was divine interference. You weren't weak for feeling that way. You were strong for surviving it. That breakdown you almost had, that was the proof that your calling was waking up, because the enemy doesn't come for the comfortable. It comes for the dangerous. And the way you survived that depression, that anxiety, that numbness, that was not your doing. That was divine protection for your mind. You were walking through a dark night of the soul, but heaven never stopped watching. Some of you were in relationships that drained you. Others were buried in loneliness. Others were walking with trauma that had no name. But still, you kept breathing, even if it was just barely. Even if you had to crawl. Even if you didn't want to. You did. That's not weakness, that's holy resilience. And now you see different. You walk different. You speak less, but with more weight. You recognize people who are there now because you were once them. You don't run from pain anymore. You sit with it because it taught you how to survive invisibly. Chosen one, you didn't just survive mental collapse. You were reborn inside it, and that is why the enemy fears you now. Reflection, question. What if your silence didn't mean absence? What if it was sacred training? And what if those nights that almost took you were the nights that made you into this version of you, the one who now sees everything? Part 4. The third time was physical, but heaven moved faster. A street corner at dusk, slick pavement, screeching tires, a hospital room filled with monitors, a night where the world turned upside down, but you didn't leave it. The third time, death didn't hide. It didn't whisper. It charged straight at you. This time, it was real, concrete, loud, bloody. This time, people saw it. The headlines could have carried your name. The monitors almost flatlined. The pain wasn't imagined. It screamed. And still, you didn't die. They said, you're lucky. But luck doesn't bend time. What happened wasn't chance. It was divine interruption. The crash missed you. The knife didn't pierce deep enough. The medicine finally worked. The hemorrhaging stopped. The ambulance arrived just in time. You shouldn't have made it, but heaven whispered again, not this one. This wasn't just survival. This was a cosmic override. Time folded, angels moved, the sequence shifted. You may not remember how it all unfolded, but your spirit does. It knows how close you were. It knows what hovered in that room. It knows something sacred stood between you and the exit. When death came in physical form, heaven flexed. Not because you're better than anyone, not because you were more righteous, but because you were more assigned. And when your purpose is still active, death cannot override your breath. Chosen one, when your body failed, your mission didn't. Some of you have scars, others have none. But you feel the moment still. It replays like a dream you can't escape. It wakes you up in the night. That's not trauma, that's memory. That's your soul reminding you. You've already faced what others fear, and you made it through. You didn't just walk away. You walked out with an anointing. Your eyes carry more now. People notice it even if they can't name it. Animals sense it. Children stare. Strangers pause. Why? Because you've crossed over. You've touched death and were returned. And what comes back from that glows differently. You were in danger, real danger, but heaven was faster and now you're here. Not because it wasn't your time, but because your purpose wasn't done. What if that moment you walked away from dazed, bleeding, weeping wasn't your breakdown, but your crowning? Part 5. Your delayed destiny was never denial, it was protection. A quiet evening, a journal half filled, a phone screen glowing in a dark room full of unanswered prayers, closed doors and memories of almost. Somewhere the spirit sighs, "Why haven't I arrived yet, chosen one?" If you've ever looked around and whispered, "God, why am I still waiting?" this is your answer. You weren't forgotten, you weren't denied, you weren't behind, you were protected, not from purpose, but from premature exposure that would have cost you everything. The delay was not the enemy, it was your shield. You saw others rising faster, doors opening for them, their names called, their hands lifted, and you sat in the shadows wondering, did I miss it? But let me say this clearly, you didn't miss it. You were being preserved for it. Some assignments are so heavy they require divine timing, not human acceleration. If heaven would have let you rise too soon, you would have attached to the wrong people, stepped into the wrong spotlight, built on wounds you hadn't healed yet, and the cost would have been your voice, your peace, your truth. So you were hidden, not because you weren't ready to be seen, but because the world wasn't ready to see you clearly. The delay wasn't about slowness, it was about alignment. While you waited, you were growing roots. You were shedding false identities. You were detoxing from pain. You were learning how to recognize divine versus distraction. You were gaining weight in the spirit. Now, when you speak, rooms shift. Now, when you enter, the atmosphere changes. Now you move differently because the delay built something in you the rush never could. You're not just older, you're more whole. So if your journey felt out of sync, if you spent years in silence, if your progress was invisible, that's not a curse. That's a sign you're walking in a delayed destiny, and that means heaven has something rare on your life. Others were launched. You were layered, and now you carry depth they never had. Don't resent the pause. It protected your purity, it preserved your calling, it filtered your connections, and it baptized your discernment. You weren't late. You were being timed for impact. And now that the veil is lifting, you'll realize every delay was divine acceleration in disguise. What if you weren't behind? What if your arrival was scheduled for such a time as this? Part 6. What the enemy saw and why you were attacked so early before memory. In the womb, in the hospital bassinet, on the school bus, in a broken home where you felt too much, too soon. Chosen one. The enemy didn't wait until you were grown to fear you. It feared you before you even spoke. Your first cries stirred the spirit realm. Your birth wasn't just biological, it was cosmic disruption. The enemy detected the frequencies on your life, the light encoded in your DNA. And so the attacks came, fast, hard, relentless, not because you were broken, but because you were blazing. From the very beginning, you carried something rare, blueprints, codes, assignments. The spiritual realm saw it, the generational curse breaker, the one who would say enough, the one who would awaken others just by being. You didn't even know your power yet, but darkness did. So it struck early, with confusion, with chaos, with shame. Your childhood wasn't ease, it was initiation, emotional abandonment, physical threats, addiction in your bloodline, anxiety in your mind, constant mislabeling, too sensitive, too much, weird. But you weren't weird. You were wired differently. You didn't belong to the world. You belonged to a mission. The enemy tried to scar you before you found your sword. That's why your inner child still flinches. That's why certain songs trigger tears. That's why you remember the hallway, the smell of fear, the night no one came, because you were attacked. But you were never alone. Even in the worst moment, a divine whisper lingered. Hold on, you're not finished. Every attack was confirmation. Every wound was an echo. This one is dangerous to darkness, and still you're here, still breathing, still rising, still glowing in silence. The enemy didn't fear your pain, it feared your healing, because a healed chosen one is unshakable. You weren't attacked because of what you did, you were attacked because of what you carry, and even now, that light is activating. The same light that triggered hell is the same light now guiding others out. You were a threat before you were trained. Now you're trained and you're lethal. The enemy saw you coming, so it tried to end you before you arrived. But it failed, because God saw you first. What if every childhood battle wasn't proof of abandonment, but proof of assignment? Part 7. Why you were hidden and why the spotlight missed you, the sidelines, the background of everyone else's big moments, scrolls of congratulations you never got. Chosen one. You weren't invisible. You were veiled. You were passed over, overlooked, underestimated. And it wasn't fair, but it was divine. Because the very thing you thought was delay was actually divine concealment. You weren't being rejected. You were being rooted. You kept wondering, why didn't they pick me? But heaven was whispering, because I never gave them permission. The platform they stood on would have broken you. The attention they got would have wounded you. The relationships they entered would have derailed you. So you were hidden. In plain sight, gifted, anointed, but camouflaged. You weren't unseen. You were unexposed by design. Some of your friends got famous fast. Others found love early. Some started ministries, built brands, got applause. And you sat in the back row. You prayed in silence. You healed alone. You wondered if God skipped your name on the list. But beloved, you weren't skipped. You were sealed. Heaven hides the ones it's preparing, because if you had been seen too early, they would have misunderstood your depth, tried to label you, package you, use you. They would have called your sensitivity weakness, your dreams delusion, your discernment overthinking. So heaven said, not yet. The spotlight isn't always light. Sometimes it's fire, and fire consumes what isn't fortified. So you were strengthened in silence, tested behind the curtain, built in the background. You weren't stuck. You were being fortified. And now the veil is lifting. And when they finally see you, they'll realize you didn't just arrive. You were being revealed. Your obscurity was an anointing. Your waiting was warfare. Your silence was preparation. You don't need to fight for attention anymore. You don't need to chase rooms you were never called to. You don't need to post louder or show more, because what's on your life will announce itself. And when heaven says, go, no spotlight will be able to look away. You were hidden, but never forgotten. You were delayed, but never denied. You were in training for a calling only you can carry. What if your invisibility wasn't punishment, but a prophetic cloak for the unveiling that's about to begin? D.e.a.th. What you gained from walking through fire. The aftermath ashes still smoldering, a mirror that doesn't reflect the same face, the silence after the screaming, the rebirth that doesn't announce itself. It just breathes. Chosen one. You didn't walk through fire just to be hurt. You walked through it to be changed. Not every storm came to destroy you. Some came to deliver you from lies, from illusions, from parts of you that couldn't walk into your future. You thought it was warfare, and it was, but it was also sacred refining, because some chains can't be broken, they have to be burned off. And the fire, it chose you, because you could take it, because you were already carrying flame in your spirit. And the fire recognized its own. It didn't kill you, it reintroduced you. You didn't just survive. You became something holy in the heat. Now you speak with weight, not volume. Now you walk with purpose, not panic. Now you see the unseen, not because you're paranoid, but because pain sharpened your eyes. You don't get this kind of peace from comfort. You get it from fire, because once you've buried parts of yourself you thought you needed and still stood up, you realize no rejection can define you. No loss can erase your light. No storm can scatter what was sealed by God. You came out of that season scorched but sacred. There's a fire in your eyes now, a stillness that scares people, not because you're angry, but because you're anchored. You've stopped chasing people. You've stopped begging to be understood. You've stopped shrinking to stay safe. Why? Because you met your shadow and came out holding the flame. The version of you now isn't afraid of the dark because you lived in it and you lit a match. And here's the holy truth. The fire didn't destroy you. It destroyed what was destroying you. And now you walk with an edge, a softness that's sharp, a boldness wrapped in silence, a heart that burns with discernment. You're not fragile anymore. You're forged. And the fire didn't take your soul. It gave your soul a weapon. What if the flames weren't your failure, but your crowning? And what if the ashes you carry now are the evidence that you never broke? You just burned into who you really are. Part 9. The supernatural mark but your escapes activated. A dream you can't shake, a left hand that tingles when you pray, a strange feeling before people confess things they never told anyone, the spiritual fingerprint invisible to man, undeniable in the spirit. Chosen one, after your escapes, you didn't just survive, you were marked. Not visibly, but eternally. Each close call carved something on your soul, a signal, a vibration, a sound in the spirit realm that only heaven and hell can hear. And now you carry something. That's why people stare. That's why some fear you and they don't know why. That's why technology glitches near you, why animals react, why strangers confess their trauma in your presence, why you feel what's not being said. Your body didn't change, but your frequency did. You're not haunted, you're activated. And when the spirit realm sees you now, it sees light codes, access points, assignments still glowing in your aura. Every escape was a key, and now your soul holds doors no one else can open. Have you noticed? Prophetic dreams becoming more frequent, seeing numbers like 700, 3444 at strange times, feeling energy shifts before people speak, knowing when someone's lying, even when they're smiling. That's not paranoia. That's your mark pulsing. When death missed you, heaven stamped you. Your name was etched into timelines that haven't unfolded yet. Your voice was logged into assignments yet to be released. Your presence became a code that triggers awakening in others. That's why people either cling to you or run from you. There is no in-between, because your energy does not allow stagnancy. It activates, it convicts, it calls souls back to God. You are a walking portal, not because of what you do, but because of who you survived becoming. And here's what most don't realize. The mark comes with a cost. You'll outgrow people fast. You'll crave solitude. You'll ache for silence like food. You'll feel everything, and sometimes you'll feel alone in a room full of people. But that's not punishment. That's sensitivity as a superpower, because what was activated in you wasn't for the crowds. It was for the called, chosen one. The reason you can't unfeel, unsee, or unhear certain things is because you were marked for higher awareness. You didn't make this happen. You didn't earn it with effort. It came through survival. And now you carry proof not in scars, but in your spirit. You are not crazy. You are coded. You are not random. You are radiating. You are not too much. You are marked. And the realm that tried to end you now trembles when you wake up. What if the strange things you feel are actually spiritual technology awakening inside of you? And what if the mark you carry is the exact reason you were sent here now? Part 10. You were saved on purpose. Now walk in power, present day. You watching this, still breathing, still becoming. Your life a timeline laced with miracles no one clapped for, but heaven recorded in fire. Chosen one, you didn't just escape death. You walked away with dominion, not pride, not ego, but a quiet, holy power that comes when you know I'm still here. Because heaven isn't finished with me yet. This wasn't a rescue story. This was a revelation. You were supposed to be gone, but you're still here. Why? Because your breath has work to do. Your voice has healing to release. Your life is a living prophecy. You're not just a survivor. You're a weapon walking in skin. And now you can't live like you don't know. You've heard the call. You've seen too much. You've survived too deeply to play small. No more shrinking, no more asking for permission, no more dimming your light to make others comfortable. You didn't escape to hide. You escaped to lead. So now bless with your words. Pray like your breath shifts things. Move like angels walk with you because they do. Speak when spirit nudges you. Rest when you're told to wait. War in worship when the enemy gets loud. You've already proven what can't break you. Now it's time to become what you were saved to be. The enemy failed, but your assignment hasn't. The timeline is catching up. The veil is lifting, and you're standing in the doorway of everything hell hoped you'd never walk into. This is your holy announcement. Heaven is backing you. You've been licensed through pain, anointed through delay, marked by what didn't kill you. And now you're dangerous in the most beautiful way. Don't just live, lead. Don't just exist, expand. Don't just remember, release. You were saved on purpose. Now walk like it. What would change if you lived every day like the divine interrupted death to keep you here because someone still needs your fire? You didn't just survive. You were chosen to rise if you've made it this far. It's not by accident. It's because your soul already knew this was your confirmation. You weren't watching just another video. You were watching the evidence that your life matters, that God did see when they tried to break you, that heaven did intervene when death stood too close, that your timeline was never forgotten. What if your pain wasn't proof you were abandoned, but proof you were protected? You didn't just go through darkness, you walked it home. You didn't just outlast the storm, you became the thunder after it. And now, chosen one, the only thing left to do is this: walk like someone death couldn't keep. Walk with power, walk with peace, walk with discernment and destiny on your back. You were chosen from the beginning, even when it didn't feel like it, especially then. You carry the mark, the memory, the flame, the mission. You are the living proof that heaven invests in the broken, rebuilds the discarded, and resurrects what man gave up on. Your survival is sacred, your story is strategy, and your spirit is a sound that makes darkness tremble. You've been through the fire, now carry the flame. You were delayed, never denied. You were tested, never forgotten. You were hit, but never taken, because you weren't born to break. You were born to burn bright. Comment 777. If your spirit knows you didn't just survive, you were chosen to rise. And if this was your sign, then let the spirit realm know you received it. You're not crazy, you're not weak, you're awakened. You were chosen.